finished at Woodrow Wilson,
Yeah.
which is one of the top 300 high schools in the United States.
That was in Dallas where you grew up, right? Uh-huh.
I went on up the next year in 42.
Mm-hmm.
I went on up there to North Texas, and I spent a year in North Texas.
In Denton?
And,
Uh-huh.
and then the Navy wanted me to go into my field, which I was going to go into anyway.
Yeah.
And so they took me in July, rather, the 1st of July of 43.
Of 43. Now, were you drafted or did you join up? Or
I joined up.
Yeah.
I joined what they call the V12 program.
Uh-huh.
And I went to dental school through that. I'll get to it in a minute.
Yeah.
But anyway, they took 75 of us out of North Texas. 2 of us went in the Navy, and the rest of them went in the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sent to Louisiana Tech, and I stayed there a year, and then Baylor said they'd take me in to dental school if the Navy wanted to send me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Navy says, "You darn right, we want you to go as a dentist," because they were short of dentists.
Right.
And so I went from Louisiana Tech to Lake Pontchartrain Navy Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went from there to the dental school, and then I graduated from the dental school in 49.
Mm-hmm.
And I got married the next night after I graduated.
I'll be darned.
I had told my family I was going to graduate before I got married.
Yeah.
And I met my wife when she came to nursing school there at Baylor,
Uh-huh.
which was in Dallas.
Right. Baylor Dental School,
Yeah.
which is still there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
the dental school, but it's now with A&M.
Right. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And anyway, they sent me to dental school, and I finished the dental school, and they said, "Okay, we need you up in Norfolk, Virginia." So I married the next night after I graduated, and I went to Norfolk, Virginia. And my wife finished nursing school about 6 weeks later and flew up to Norfolk, except that she had to land in Richmond because of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And they put her on a bus, and she rode the bus from Richmond to Norfolk.
Uh-huh.
And she said when she got in the bus station there, she said she couldn't believe the way it looked. There were people all over the floor everywhere, and all sorts of people.
Yeah.
But she couldn't find anybody. She got a cab to go out to where I'd rented us a house
Mm-hmm.
out on the beach. And the cab driver didn't even know how to get there. He had to find out from somebody else how to get there.
I'll be darned.
And so she got there about 4 o'clock in the morning
Oh, my.
and woke the lady up,
Yeah.
whose son was an MD practicing in Fort Worth.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, she woke her up at 4:30 and, of course, went on to bed. And when I got up the next morning, and I, of course, hadn't heard from her,
Yeah.
so I called her folks, and they said, "Well, yeah, they put her on the airplane the day before."
Mm-hmm.
So about that time, I got a call from her at
Yeah.
the woman that owned the little apartment.
Right.
And we were from about here to the other side of the street over there from the water.
Uh-huh.
And she said all she could hear all night was that water slash. And anyway, my oldest daughter, Donna Ford, she's married, divorced now, but she teaches at Sam Rayburn School.
Mm-hmm. Here?
Here,
Mhm.
yeah. And she's been teaching there about 20 years.
Yes, sir.
She was going to go into dental hygiene. She went to Baylor and she met this guy, Jack Ford, who ended up, he and Calvin Guest started a bank out here. You might have remembered that. And anyway, they ended up getting a divorce, and he lives in Carolina now. His brother had gone over there with Toyota and had a good deal, and found him a place that he could come over and run.
Right.
He had grown up in Jefferson, Texas.
Yeah.
You know where Jefferson is?
Yes, sir. Out in East Texas?
Yeah.
Sure.
And around in the lakes there.
Right.
But his dad had a dry cleaning place. And he had grown up in that and knew how to handle it. And his brother found him a place over in Carolina that wanted somebody to get it, so they bought it over there and went over there.
I see.
And then I was in Norfolk for a year and a little more than a year, and I had a captain that was in the Norfolk dental base. He was a dentist, but he'd gone through the Navy services and had a captain, and he made admiral and became the head of the dental department in Washington. He took over the United States. But before he left there, he called three of us that had gone from Baylor, been in the Navy and been up there, called us in and tried to get us to sign up for the regular Navy. And he told a beautiful story, how when you could get out, you were away from your wife and you could do this and that. And anyway, all three of us said no, we weren't going to join him. And so all of us went on board a ship.
Yeah.
And I got on the President Adams, which was a transport during the fighting. But at that particular time, it had become a dependent and a supply ship for the Caribbean and down to Trinidad. And are you familiar with have you ever been to Trinidad?
No, I've never been there, but I know the area you're talking
Port
about.
of Spain in Trinidad is the most cosmopolitan city I've ever been in. I've been to New York and all that, but it was a real place. And my officers on board the ship, there were a couple of them that were real close to me, and we would go up and go into Port of Spain and see the city, and then we'd go up in the evening and go up in the mountains and watch them dance up there. They danced till about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we couldn't figure out for the longest time how in the world do they do this. But you know what? The secret of it, they take about a 4-hour siesta after lunch. But
what year is this now that we're talking that you were on the President Adams?
19 and oh gosh, I was in Norfolk from 49 to about 51. And then I went on the ship, and we had what we did there. I stayed on the ship until I got a chance to transfer to Corpus Christi.
Okay, to the Naval Air Base there?
Yeah. And when I got there, I decided I wasn't going to stay in the service any longer. That was a horrible place. The captain of it was one of these all military guys. And if you had the duty, you stayed on the base. Boom, boom, that was it. Whereas in Norfolk, at least the captain, if you were home and they needed you, they would call you and you could get on the bus and travel in there right quick, or if you had a car, you could come that way. But when I got out and went to, well, I'm ahead of myself now. Okay, I was on this ship. We took a month each trip. We'd go from Norfolk to New York, and then back down to Guantanamo Bay on the end of it, and where the naval base was. And we took supplies to each place. And from there, we'd go down to Trinidad and then over to Panama. And we would take supplies to the Coca-Cola over there in Panama. And then we'd come back up. And a lot of times the captain who was from Houston, by the way, and a good tennis player, he and one of the nurses that had gone up through the service, and she was a full lieutenant, they played me and Dan Galvin, who was at JG at that time also, and he had been a diver at Ohio State, and he was in the Navy too, and he could speak pretty good Spanish. I mean, he could be interpreted at least. I couldn't speak Spanish and still can't. Now, my family moved from Dallas my last couple of years in dental school, and they went to Nuevo Laredo, or Laredo, right?
Laredo,
And my two younger brothers, who now live here, both graduated from Laredo High School, Martin, I think the name of it, and they both can speak very good Spanish. And let's see, I've lost my contact.
No, that's okay. I want to back up. When you first entered the Navy, you said that was in 43, right? The war was still going on. Did you serve overseas?
No.
Yeah.
I stayed at Louisiana Tech until the war was over.
And got your education and went to dental school.
And went to dental, and I was in dental school, and when the war was over, and I was downtown at the evening celebrating with everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, golly, you weren't there. I know.
No.
But it was a place I'll never forget. I mean, everybody was so happy to. The war had ended.
Was this for VE or VJ? After the Japanese had surrendered, when the whole war was over.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the downtown there, you couldn't hardly walk through the streets. It was so crowded.
Right.
But anyway, I was on board that ship, and we went all around the Caribbean and delivered people and supplies. Now the people that we took to the stations, they were dependents, and we took them to be with their families there.
Right.
And we had two nurses on board ship, and they put all of the passengers down where the nurses could take care of them, because most of those people had never been on board a ship, and I hadn't either. But the first night out on the ship, we were delayed a month because of the weather. But the first night, we were on our way to New York, and just outside of Norfolk, as we hit the Atlantic Ocean, I heard the biggest old crash, and dishes were everywhere. And when the ship went up like this and back up like that, and then when it did, the galley just dropped all the ship, all of the dishes and everything. And that was the only time that I felt like I was going to get seasick, but I didn't. Anyway, I spent a lot of time on that ship, actually.
Were you the ship's dentist?
Yeah.
So that was your job, right?
Yeah, that was my job.
Right.
And I set a record on that ship for dental supply. I mean, working on patients. I filled more teeth and took care of more of the patients than anybody else that had ever been on that ship. Now, there was a dentist here in Bryan named Jones. You might have known him, I don't know, but he had been in the Navy, and he was stationed in one of the islands that we went into there.
Mm-hmm.
We also went on to Puerto Rico
Mm-hmm.
several times.
Mm-hmm.
And just as a sidelight, I mean,
No, that's good. Yeah.
I was never so surprised when I went into Puerto Rico as we went in this channel down there to the port. All along the beach, there were cardboard that were either a washing machine or a refrigerator or something. They were side by side all the way down here of people living out there.
Wow. Yeah.
Homeless, you would
Right.
say, but actually they had a home. That was their home.
Right.
But you talk about discouraging.
Oh,
God.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And thrilled that I was an American.
Right. 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 Right.
And then I got on board. I had lots. I'll tell you some instances you don't need to print. But the executive officer on board was retired. He retired because he couldn't practice law in Louisiana. And he was a horse's rearer, as most executives were. He would invite himself on if we were going into town. He'd invite himself to come. And when we were in Guantanamo, I'd made friends with a woman that we took back down there. Her dad had died in New York, and when we picked her up in New York, and one of my jobs on the board of the ship was to help the people that were on there be friendly to them and just listen to them is mainly what you did. But anyway, in Guantanamo Bay, she lived on a place, and toward the town, there were 2 trails like this, and you drove along those trails, and they were about this high, and then down in a ditch. But on both sides, I mean, you didn't have a solid part. You just had those trails to stay on. And one of the trips that she had invited all of the officers to come out to her house for dinner, and the executive just included himself, which he wasn't supposed to be. And we had a old station wagon there, a wooden one. You remember how those would look?
Right. Yeah. Sure.
And so he just was going to drive us back to the ship, and he was drunk as hell. And he drove us, and my friend sat up there, and he would grab this wheel and keep him on the road. And the next day, well, they were both on the bridge, and the executive said to him, he says, Dennis says, how did we get home last night? And he turned to him and he said, you drove us, you son of a bitch. And he said that when he did that, said the executive officers just turned and walked away. And another thing that he did, he had told me he didn't want to see me leaving the ship as much as I did when we hit port. And of course, the captain and this nurse played against us tennis. Every time we'd hit port, we'd have roll call and everything, and then we were to meet at the gangplank, and he'd have a car down there to take us to the officers' club, and we'd go play tennis, and we could beat them 2 sets barely.
Yeah.
And then after that, we could beat them real easy because they tired pretty good.
Right.
Because my captain at that time was 55 years old, and I wasn't but about 23 or so.
Right.
Anyway, after he told me not to leave the ship, I came down and was there, and he looked at me and said, he says, I thought I told you you couldn't leave. I said, yes, sir. I said, but the captain called me and said, meet him here at the gangplank at 9 o'clock. And he said, oh, that's okay. Oh, golly. I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of interesting people.
Indeed.
This woman was married to a guy that their last name was Cass, C-A-S-S. And I saw in the paper here, 40 years ago, I guess, where he was in charge of the base in the Philippines, I think he was. No, it wasn't either. As long as over in Vietnam. And I wrote him a letter and asked him if how his kids were doing and everything. And evidently his wife had died or so. I never heard from him. But he didn't like it because she invited us to come to the house. But she'd usually have about 4 or 5 of us out there every time we'd hit Guantanamo Bay. And a lovely person. Just, I had a lot of grief for her because she lost her dad.
Yeah.
She was very close to him, and I could sense that there was a lot of tension in that marriage.
Right.
And so I visited real close with her. We just sat and talked sometimes.
Right. So how long were you on board the Adams? Total, about?
I was on board the Adams about a year and a half.
Okay.
And then I got a chance. I saw there was an opening at Corpus Christi, and I asked my captain, I said, he knew I was fixing to be released from the Navy. And so, anyway, I got shifted down there, and
Right.
when I pulled in there, the captain was, I could see we were going to have trouble.
But you were one of the dentists on base there at the Naval Air Station?
Yeah.
In Corpus Christi?
Yeah, for about 3 months.
For about 3 months. And this would have been in the early 50s still?
Yeah.
Yeah. But is that when you retired from the Navy? Was there? So you
Well, okay, I actually didn't retire.
Right.
From it. I stayed in the reserve.
In the reserves, okay.
And when after we came out, I got out of the Navy. I had to. We went when we got to Corpus. We couldn't find any place to rent. Nobody wanted to rent us a house for 3 months.
Right.
And so one of my classmates in dental school was stationed down there, and he said, come live with us. They had a little boy that was a year older than my oldest daughter, and we lived with them. And then he got out of the Navy, and we kept that apartment for another month or so, and then I moved to San Marcos, where my folks had moved from Laredo.
From Laredo? Okay.
Yeah, an interesting thing there. Are you an IRS man?
No, sir.
My father was an accountant. He did not have a CPA. And he said he didn't want to fool with that. He said that's just a bunch of political stuff. But he also had a license to practice before the Internal Revenue Board. And when he was in Laredo, he had a case come up. They called him into it. The people that owned this company, a trucking company, they were charged with 29 counts at the IRS. And my dad went to the court, and he said, we'll concede the first point is legitimate. But he said, we'll talk about the other 28. And so he beat the IRS on 28 counts.
Wow.
So when he went to San Antonio to practice, the IRS came by every week to just go look through his records. And my dad finally asked him, he said, if I retired, would y'all leave me alone? Oh, we're not harassing you. And he said, I know you're not, but he says, would you do it? Just forget about me. And Dad came home that night and he said, I'm going to retire. He said, somewhere in my records, they keep going through them, somewhere I could possibly have made some sort of mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And he said if they find it, he said they could just really hit me with a jail term and everything. He said, I'm just getting out. And he said, the funniest thing, as soon as he retired, they didn't ever bother him anymore.
Yeah.
But he hated the IRS.
Yeah, well, he got their attention by beating them out on all those counts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So you were in the Navy Reserve.
When we,
Uh-huh.
okay, let me go ahead a little bit now.
Okay, sure.
From there, from Corpus Christi, we moved to San Marcos.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in San Marcos when Gordon Jr. was born.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking around and I couldn't find a place. I went up to Dallas and my gosh, no place to rent, and if you could find a place, it was just outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
So a salesman that I knew from one of the dental supply companies, he said, how about you practicing in a small town? He said, outside of Dallas. And I said, well, where? And he said, come on, I'll show you. So he took me to the MEXIA.
Mahia. Mexia. Yeah. Mahia. Yeah. Right.
And so we moved up there.
Okay.
In 1st of July.
Uh-huh.
And
So this is you and your wife, and how many children now? 2?
no, I had one at the time.
Right.
The other one was born in San Marcos.
Yeah, it was Gordon.
Gordon Jr.
Right. Uh-huh.
And we moved right after he was born, so we went up there and
To Mahia.
to Mahia.
Right.
And Dr. Martin was a dentist up there, and I went in to see him and asked him if, well, that I was interested in the town.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, do you drink? And I said, well, not enough that you can say I do. I said, I might take a sip or something, but I said, I don't drink. And he said, good, we got a dentist here right now that can't stay sober, and he's leaving town. And he said, I wish you'd have been here yesterday. He said, I just took back the dentist that had practiced with me for about 2 years, and he got married and went up to Fort Worth, and he came back in yesterday, wanted to come back in here, and I told him to come on, that I could use him here. He said, if you'd have been here the day before, I'd have hired you.
Yeah.
But he said, we'll find you an office space. And so he called James Stafford, who was an insurance man, and said, I've got a dentist that wants to come here. Said, find him an office and a home. So he said, go down the street here about a block, and he's down there. And I went down there. At that time, little James hadn't been born. You know who little James is?
Little James?
Stafford.
Or I know there's an entertainer named Jim Stafford.
No,
but-
this Stafford is one that's scammed a bunch of people.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay. Yeah.
we went to the pharmacist there, and they had a couple of doctors upstairs, and MDs up there, but he said, we got a little room if you want to go look at it. He said, we can rent it to you. And I said, well, let me see it. So we went up there, way up, one of those, back there they built. I don't know whether you knew it or not, but I found this out. In the 20s, when the oil fields hit Mahia, they had over 27,000 people living in around there.
Wow.
And when I moved there was 7,000 something.
Uh-huh.
The last time I went through the town there, the population was 7,000.
So it hadn't moved, yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I went up there and I looked at it, and the pharmacist that owned the building says, I'll rent this to you. You're going to have to fix it up. So it says, I'm not going to fix it up for you. Said, but if you'll fix it up, well, I'll rent it to you. And I said, well, how much do you want for it? Oh, he said about $35. So I said, okay, that's good. So I got a guy that was a World War I veteran who was a jack of all trades. He could do most anything. And his biggest quality was he could talk.
Mm-hmm.
And if you came up there, he didn't get any work done. But if you stayed away, he could really turn it out.
Right.
So he fixed it up, and I opened up a practice there, and I stayed up there for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I went back to Dr. Martin's office, and I said, well, we found an office for me, but I said I don't have any place to live. And his assistant was there, and she said, well, I know some people that are moving to Victoria on the 1st. He said, and she said, let me see what they do. So we went out and looked at this house, and it was about the only one in my head to rent at that time. You could go in the front door and you could take a marble and drop it in it, and it'd come up. But these people were going, and that's, you know who else is from Mahia?
Well, I know a lot of people, or a lot of the old football coach is from Mahia. My friend Mike Wright is from Mahia, who
Ty Bain, you were talking about.
is the boss at KBTX.
Yeah, but the
He's from
football
Mahia.
coach.
No, I was thinking of who was it? The black football coach who was a pro coach. I forgot his name now. He's from Mahia. What's her name? The movie star that died a few years ago. She's from Mahia.
Yeah.
And Mike Wright, who's a good friend of mine, who's out at KBTX. His father is Bob Wright, who's still in Mahia. He's a newspaper writer. But there's a lot of famous people from Mahia. Yeah.
The guy that bought our home, we built our home there before we left.
Yeah.
I practiced there for several years, and then
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ritchie, I got out of the Navy in '49,
Mm-hmm.
and Dr. Ritchie had told me to come by and see him. And when I came by, he said, I'll keep in touch with you. But he said, I don't have an opening right now.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Dr. King is practicing with me. And Dr. King was his first cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd come by our house on the way to, he was originally from Italy, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd come back by through Mahia and visit with us. And we became pretty good friends. And so he came in one day and he says, I want you to move down there and practice with me. He said, Dr. King is going to orthodontia school for a couple of years, and he said he'll just give you his practice if you'll come down and take it over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, let me talk it over with Margaret and see.
I'll do it.
Good. Uh-huh.
That was Shay's boyfriend, I think.
Oh, okay.
Tall guy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, I think the house that we moved into belonged to the Wrights family.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Yeah. You're still in Mahia, though, right?
Yeah.
So how long were you in Mahia in all?
Well, we moved there and
Right after Gordon was born. When was Gordon born?
51
51. So you moved there right after Gordon was
Yeah.
born. And when did you leave there?
in 57.
Okay, so you were there about 6 years, practicing. And then where'd you go?
Then we came down here.
Then you came down to Bryan College Station.
Yeah.
What brought you down here? Just a job, or?
Well, Tom King.
Just for King. Dr.
Yeah.
King offered you a spot.
He says you can have the practice if you'll come down here and take it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
And so Richie and I practiced together for 5 years. And he hired a hygienist that I said, why did you hire her? Well, we could use a hygienist. He had 4 operatories, and when I came down here, I had 2 of them. One across from the other, and he had 2 down this way. Okay, after 5 years and he hired this hygienist, he gave her the room across the hall, which meant that we had to split this one of his, the 3 operatories that they had over here. And I knew that at the time I went into him and I said, what are we going to do? And he said, Gordon said, we're going to either have to add on to the building here, or if you want to move, that would both our practices, we're just shoving each other. So I called Bill Fitch, who had also graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in
I see. Yeah.
And he was in my brother's class, which was 3 years. They were 3 years ahead of me. And I said, Bill, you got any of this land? He built those apartments down on Mary Lake. And he said, well, I got that last lot up there on the corner. And he said, come look at it. And I looked at it, and he said, I'll sell this to you for $4,000. I said, you got a deal. So Reagan Brown lived across the street. And Reagan liked to drive me crazy. Every time they'd put some stuff out there, you know, how you build, he'd come over. When are they going to move this trash? I said, Mr. Brown, as soon as we get this building built, I said, we'll clean this lot up real good. And so he'd come back about 2 days later. When are you going to move that mess? He was a character.
Yeah.
Did you know him?
No, No, I didn't.
Oh boy, he was
Right.
He was a character though.
Right. Now, what was your wife's name?
Margaret.
Margaret. And she's been gone.
She died in '07.
In '07, so about 3 years ago. I see. And how long have y'all lived here?
We bought this house in '59.
Oh, wow. So you've been here a long time. So you've...
I practiced here over 40 years.
Yeah.
And then I retired. But also while I was in Mahia, I stayed in the Navy Reserve. And my commanding officer at that time was Phelps Murphy, of orthodontist in Dallas, that my brother had gone to when he was about 6 years old. And Phelps was one of the developers of the artificial eye that they developed in World War II. But he was a heck of a nice guy, and he kept us going up there. We never had to dress up, and except when big naval officers were coming in or something. But we would have meetings every month, and I could drive up in the afternoon. I'd leave the office and say 1 o'clock or 2 a.m. Well, even later than that, because he would usually have a meeting at one of the restaurants, and we'd have a dental meeting. We wouldn't have a Navy meeting. And he was just a heck of a fine guy.
Right.
And then when I came down here, I either had to join the reserve in Houston or go back to Dallas. Well, all my friends were up there, and buddies and everything, and Phelps Murphy was, and we were just like going to a dental meeting. And then the guy that took it over wrote a letter to everybody that he was becoming the officer when Phelps retired, and that we were going to go back to full dress, every uniform, and da-da-da-da-da. And so I picked up the phone and called him, and I said, just put me in as retiring.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you don't want to do that. And I said, yeah. I said, I can't make it. I said, it takes me from Bryan up there, it takes a whole day off.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 3-hour drive from up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a 3-hour drive back, and the next day is,
Yeah, right.
So anyway, I retired.
What year was that?
Oh, golly. 63, I think it was.
About 63. So you came down here in 56.
57.
57. And you practiced for 40 years until 97? Is that about when you retired from dentistry?
Yeah.
I see. And so you were in active Navy for 7 years, if I'm right, from 43 to 50, or 6 years to 40. When did you leave Corpus?
Well, I left Corpus in 50, but I retired from the Navy in about 63, I think it was.
Okay.
So I got.
That's when you retired from the reserves and everything,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So you about 21 years, about 20 years
Yeah.
in the Navy. Yeah. And you practiced here for 40 years, is that right?
Yeah.
So you were still you were practicing when your son started practicing, right? I mean, when Gordon
went to dental school and down in Houston.
Because he's been here an awful long time, hadn't he?
Yeah, he graduated. Oh gosh. I'd have to call him to remember.
No, that's okay. So you all have 3 children?
I have 5 children.
5 children.
3 girls and 2 boys.
Okay.
There's Donna is the oldest.
Okay.
Then Gordon comes right after her about
Right.
a year. And then skipped over to Biddy Ann, and she's married to Dr. Davis, Tommy Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a dental hygienist. And then after Biddy came Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul and Barbara, his wife, are there at Wells Fargo Bank.
Okay.
And she has they both have the reverse mortgages and elder. And then along came Shay. About 12 years after Gordon.
I see.
She was a little accident.
So she's the youngest. Okay. Yeah.
But she just lives here, and her fiance is a boy that. And I don't know what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about going into. Do you know anything about watercress?
Well, it's new. I know it's brand new, and my mother-in-law went over there and looked at it for a little while, and she said it was a very nice place. She said the only problem was that it seemed like she had to walk a long way to get around. It wasn't laid out real conveniently for older people as far as having to walk to get from one place to another. It seemed like there was a lot of walking involved.
Kind of like Waldenbrook.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah.
Well,
But there's a lot of great places. I mean, Waldenbrook's a good place. The Carriage Inn out there on Boonville Road is a good place. Matter of fact, one of the fellows that went on that trip with us is the manager out there at Carriage Inn, Stribling.
Oh yeah.
Stribling, Mr. Stribling, he's the manager at Carriage Inn.
That's a nice place.
Yeah, that's a good place. My mother-in-law, we just moved her into Crestview, but just the apartments, the Crestview Terrace.
Yeah.
She's still independent enough to where she doesn't need assisted living quite yet. Right.
That's what I'd like to do is
Right.
move over to Crestview.
Yeah. Well, Crestview Terrace, which is the apartments now,
Across.
it's just independent living. It's
Yeah.
not assisted living or anything. It's for
But-
people that are still independent. That's where my mother-in-law just moved to, and she likes it. It's nice. There's a lot of nice people over there,
Did she?
and they've got some openings right now. As a matter of fact,
Good. I'll get over there this
they've got
week.
some openings. They've got. I believe they've got three apartments fixing to open, and it's HUD, so it's based on your income. It's based totally on your income, and and her income was only her Social Security pretty much. So she got a 1-bedroom apartment for $272 a month.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but it's HUD, but it's very nice. It really is. And they have a lunch program that's an optional program for $150 a month. You can have lunch every day.
That's a good deal.
Yeah, you can have lunch every day for $5 a meal for $150 a month. And so it's nice. Yeah, that's Crestview over there on Villa Maria. Yeah.
Where did your mother-in-law live?
Sulphur Springs.
Are you from Sulphur?
No, she lived there she and her husband. Her husband died in last November, and that's where they lived. That's where my wife's parents lived, in Sulphur Springs. They lived there for a long time.
Did your wife grow up there?
No, they were from Iowa. Yeah.
Way up there.
Yeah, they were from
Our
Iowa.
lights are going off and on.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. But you ought to call them if you like Crestview and go over there and look at it, because it's, like I say, it's based on it's based totally on your income minus your medical expenses, and they put a calculator to it all after they want HUD wants a lot of documentation, and they want a lot of papers and a lot of all that kind of stuff.
Qualify for her.
And all of that. Well, I think anybody qualifies. It's just based on your income,
Yeah.
So your rent is higher or lower based on your income. So, but it's a very nice place. It really is.
Well, I met the girl that is working at Watercrest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where is it in town?
Watercrest is on Boonville Road also. It's right there. It's
Just right there by Kroger.
right near. No, Boonville Road is the street out east of the bypass that runs parallel. Boonville Road turns into Highway 30 that goes to Huntsville. It's where Christopher's is, Christopher's restaurant.
Yeah.
That's on Boonville Road. Watercrest is right near an Allen Academy. Watercrest is right around that area off of Boonville Road. It's a big old building. And that Carriage Inn is on the same road also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the girl was at Rotary Wednesday, and I met her. Her first name is Wendy,
Uh-huh.
and she said that she had just recently taken over the marketing for Watercrest.
For Watercrest?
And so I'm gonna.
Well, you ought to go over there and take a look at it. It may, that may be good. Now, it's a what I understand, I don't know how it works as far as, I think all the meals are provided, but it costs more money because of that. So, so I don't know what the costs are or anything like that, but it's but I mean, it's a brand new place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty new. So, you ought to have her take you around and look at some of these places and just make a move. Yeah, because if you get lonely or anything like that, there's lots of people around and all that. Lots of veterans. I've at Waldenbrook, I've had 6 or 7 veterans that live at Waldenbrook on this TV show. So, there's a lot of veterans over there. There's veterans everywhere. So, they're all around.
They're getting slimmer though.
Yeah, they are. So how old are you?
I was born in 25.
In 25. So you're 80. You're 85. You'll be. You already turned 85? Okay.
And I was born in May of.
So you just turned 85 a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 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 Well, this is a great story to tell. I love to tell stories of people who served in World War II, but didn't necessarily serve overseas. So as a dentist, I mean, you were kept pretty busy, right? I mean, not only on board the ship, but at the naval station. And
Yeah,
yeah.
the naval station, and of course I was in the Navy when I was going to school up until the last semester of my senior year. They took a bunch of us up to Oklahoma and discharged us for temporary duty.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I had to go to work.
Right.
Doing a lot of, at that time, penicillin was really hitting the world, and so we would go out to homes and spend the night, and boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
About every 3 hours.
Right.
And then I also sold a lot of blood at that time. They pay you so much for a pint of blood when you were if they took you.
Yeah. Do you know Dr. Cooper? J.F. Cooper?
Old J.F.
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah, he was on the trip with us.
He sat right in front of us.
Yeah.
On the trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's OC, and he were good friends.
Yeah, well, they were brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, Dr. Cooper has been my doctor, but he just recently quit seeing patients, regular patients. Just a couple of weeks ago, he quit seeing regular patients. He now just does flight physicals, is all he does now. So,
well, I hate to hear that, because I hadn't been out there to see him.
Well, this was I just found out about this just a few days ago, that he had retired from regular practice.
He wanted to, but he needed to.
Right.
He has a hard time getting around.
Yeah, he's gone downhill as far as his mobility quite a bit. Yeah, getting around. But he comes in to see you, and you go to shake his hand, and he'll say, "Don't shake me." He says, "I can't." He says, I fall out of this chair." He's a character. You got any photographs at all of yourself when you were in the Navy?
I haven't been able to get any of them.
Okay. Well, if you find anything between now and...
Well, in my garage up above, there's a big thing that they made for me in the Navy. And it's got some stuff in there.
Yeah.
And also, my daughter-in-law, Barbara, has a lot of things in a big file, so I'll get her.
Well, if you can come up with anything, and I don't need much, if you could come up with a picture or two or three that you're in, like your official Navy photograph maybe, or anything, from back then, if you can come up with 2 or 3 and just bring them when you come on Thursday. Now, is she going to bring you?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to give her the directions. It's very easy to get to. It's on campus. It's very, very easy to get
right
to.
There at TAMU, isn't it?
Yeah, it's KAMU Studios, and it's right off of George Bush Drive. It's right by the former students building, but it's very easy to get to. Matter of fact, I'll draw a map for her here.
Okay. During World War II, when they were fighting over there, and they carried a lot of regular troops on it.
And that's what you did, is you transported equipment, you transported dependents, and you went wherever you were told to go.
Right.
So you spent a lot of time on the water.
Yeah.
And playing tennis at port.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
One time, the ship was in there like this.
Yeah.
And the little gig was that we were going to take to get into the dry land was down here, and the water would go up like this, and we'd go down, and we'd go up and go down. And you had to when it got here, you jumped over on the gangplank and made it on into the ship. Or if you missed, you went down in the water about 30 feet.
I bet that got kind of interesting when you had your hands in people's mouth, right? I mean, You'd have to. You're moving around.
When that ship is going this, of course, most of the time, unless the weather was real bad, the ship was just I mean,
just glided.
You
Yeah.
didn't even know you were on the water.
Yeah, but there were a few times that you had to hold on a little bit.
You're
right. And I remember probably kind of a little bit. I don't know how old this ship was, but I remember whenever we go down to the coast, we go to Port Aransas a lot. And whenever I'm with my grandkids, they all want to go see the Lexington down in Corpus. So I remember going down there last time and seeing the dental facilities that were on that boat. So you didn't have a whole lot of space, did you?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know, I don't know whether all dentists know each other or not. Of course, you know Dr. Birdwell, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Bill's a good friend of mine. We're in a Bible study together. And do you happen to know a fellow from Huntsville named John Chandler?
Yeah.
You know John? Well, John and Janie, he and his wife, and me and my wife are very, very close friends.
Oh, good.
We spend every month we go over to his house, or he comes over to our house with another couple from Huntsville, and we play chicken foot. We play dominoes.
Yeah.
And John is a very good. Matter of fact, John's wife and my wife have been friends for 45, 50 years almost. Yeah.
Well, you being from Sulphur Springs.
I'm not from, but my wife's parents are. Yeah. I know a little bit about it. Yeah.
I have a cousin, and I had an aunt that grew up in Sulphur Springs.
Did you?
In fact, she's buried there.
Uh-huh.
She died, good 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And her son is an MD that was in the Navy. He he was admitted to Baylor Baylor Medical School in Dallas.
Uh-huh.
And the Navy wrote him a letter and said the school has moved to Houston.
Yeah.
You be there. And so he stayed in the service and he was in Washington, D.C. in charge of the budgets of all the VA hospitals in the United States.
Right.
And he's, of course, retired and living in Jackson, Mississippi, or outside of Jackson.
Yeah. They didn't really have a lot of friends in Sulphur Springs, and I forget why. He used to sell cars, and they moved city to city to city wherever he could find a car selling job. And I think about the time he retired, that was the last place he was selling cars. So, and he retired from selling cars because of his health, and they just stayed there. They didn't have any family there necessarily. That's just sort of where they stayed.
Well, that's a nice little town.
Yeah, it's a good little town. But we're glad to have her here now. So that's
What
good.
was her